aligning yourself with the proper institution, one that is a direct lender, one that does underwrite for FHA, VA, USDA directly, is very critical. If you're dealing with institutions that don't do direct lending or direct underwriting, that does slow the process, and you could run into that wall where you don't get the documents on time. Aligning yourself with organizations that are prepared for this is going to be very important, not only for the attorneys, for the buyers, for the sellers, for anybody who's looking to do a real estate transaction. And there are institutions that are prepared for these changes already. Us at Movement Mortgage have been, doing electronic signatures for years. We're a lot of our and I'm not, this isn't an advertisement for Movement Mortgage. It's just talking about a platform that exists that has already been put in place to, allow us to get closing documents, getting a clear to close ahead of time and getting closing documents, sometimes, like I said, weeks before the actual closing. So if it's going to be important for the real estate agents and it's going to be important for the borrowers to do their due diligence and find the right organization when it comes to applying for a loan.
I would agree. Unfortunately, a lot of times we have that conversation with consumers early in the process and say, if you don't go with a lender that is good at what they do, your closing process could be slowed down by 2 to 3 weeks. They sometimes don't hear that. They've got a relative that told them they should go to ABC Mortgage. They have a friend that works there, or something. So there's reasons why they're choosing their mortgage lender, and a lot of times we as attorneys or even real estate agents don't have much say in who they go to, and if we refer too heavily, then we have other issues.
Tatha, hi, this is Scott.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
I know you. Well, the point made by Alice, I want to hit this give this to Michael. You raised a good point, I think, on top of Alice's point, where the consumers out there doing their best. They want a home. They don't get all involved in these high-level Capitol Hill issues and legislation and new kind of amendments to existing rules. And what happens in the world I'm concerned about in this new world where the same old realtor refers to the same old mortgage guy or gal in the office that brings the donuts and the sweets and the carbs and the bagels, and they do stuff like they did in the 90s, and they may not be set up like a top company like Movement, amongst others, are. I mean, if that's really setting up for a disaster. I want to give Mike this point where the realtors, especially even in an area down like here, which is controlled by lawyers, need to be up on that. This is not business as usual. There's a lot of changes, and if you do this, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to have dissatisfied clients, regardless of this awesome best friend who returns the calls right off the beeper immediately.
But beeper? Did you say the beeper?
Yeah, the beeper. I'm sorry, I still do stuff all the time.
Are you still using it?
No, Mike has it. Like so, speaking of beepers, let me give this to Michael. Michael, what do you think about an approach that realtors may have to accept where they can't do business as usual with the referrals?
Right, and great point. And hi, Tafa. This is Mike Brennan. I'm Regional Director for Movement Mortgage. And it really kind of to just expand a little bit on what Alex said is I think we all agree, though, the most important thing and one thing that's probably been lacking for the consumers and for realtors and the attorneys and all parties concerned is, which is our most important thing, is the first step in the process with us, or what should be with any lender, is setting the right expectations. So if you tell everybody up front on what the process is going to be, what the turn times are and what's expected of all parties, it might be a little bit of a paradigm shift with the new laws and the new disclosures coming out. But if everybody's on the same page and are upfront on what's expected by what time frame, I think it's going to make it a lot easier for it. And we work hand in hand with a lot of our realtor partners and our attorneys as well. I mean, we're almost 90% purchase business, so we understand the frustration. We understand the importance for our client. Number two, I think very important is the way that we've always operated our company since 2007 when they started was, we don't underwrite to a closing date. We underwrite to a time period to get the file cleared to close within 7 to 10 business days. And a lot of people these days, and as an attorney, September 14th, you write a contract, maybe the closing date is scheduled for December 1st. So you have a lot of people on all parties will say, okay, well, we don't have to do anything. Let's put that aside until it's getting closer to the closing date. And then it happens to be like this kind of hurry up now and try to get everything done. And then, oops, we forgot something. So I think if the expectations are set up front, I think if you start the process from day one, which is what our philosophy is as a company, then you're going to alleviate a lot of those problems.
So that's what I think where the realtor comes in, where they cannot just where they cannot just make the referral, step back, cross their fingers and their toes, and then show up in the corner at the closing. They may have to be more involved with not necessarily the right guy, of course, the right person, but continue to stay on top to more make this thing happen. We're in an insulated world here. This is not Delaware. This is not Kansas City. We're in a world where the realtors can do much less because the lawyers do everything alongside the lenders and the lenders' attorneys.
Tatha, are you in agreement?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I also, think that in states where we do have more lawyer involvement, that the consumer should have the right to waive the 3-day period because they do have legal counsel and they're not just a consumer that's out there on their own. So I think there's some parts of the law that missed, the states that aren't escrow states and not states that are handled by title companies. They're handled by legal professionals. And it is a little bit frustrating, I know, for, the consumer that is going to be out of their apartment tomorrow when they have 3 kids and we can't close for 3 days. So there is still a lot of frustration that I can foresee coming with the changes.
Tatha, on to that point, I'm glad you called in. We all have this in New York State or lower New York State, this 30-day crazy, not time of the essence, but this on or about safety net. Do you think that there's even the possibility of any litigation between the parties if they blow a closing date due to maybe being derelict in their duties and getting their stuff to the lender?
I don't think so. I mean, you have to issue the time of the essence letter to force it, and then they have 30 days to perform. So, I mean, even if you're with a bad lender, I would think that they could perform within 30 days after they've missed a closing date. But maybe.
Chris, did you want to add to that?
Well, I think, Taffy, you raised some very good points, and I've seen closings in New Jersey that have blown way past their dates, and parties already threatening to sue each other. I think at the end of the day, if everyone kind of steps back, this is a consumer transaction. For most people, it's the biggest transaction in their lives, and so no one really wants to sue anyone, as I'm sure you've been through many of these. And no one really wants to sue anyone. They want to get in their house, or they want to get out of their house and sell their house. And I think just getting all the right parties involved, as you've kind of heard over and over again, is crucial. And maybe working the problem backwards, from the standpoint of, you set your closing date, and then when you meet with your client initially, I know I've had this conversation with my clients, where you set the expectations. Okay, have you applied for your mortgage? Where are you in the process? Who are you going with? What's the story? Now, that's how I got into the mortgage business, from the real estate law practice. So I get the whole thing, but I think it's an integrated process, and especially in a state like New York, where you have such heavy attorney involvement, you can really kind of distinguish yourself from your competition in a lot of ways by virtue of being the attorney who sets the expectations, who has their clients kind of lined up and ready to go, so you don't miss your closing dates. I think it actually presents an opportunity, and I think that's kind of when all these changes occur. You can take 2 approaches. You can say, oh my gosh, we got to change, or you can say, hey, here's an opportunity. How do I distinguish myself in this environment? That's the road we took at Movement Mortgage, was try to distinguish ourselves in front of this change in regulation. And I think it's exciting. I think there's going to be some bumps in the road. There's going to be some headaches, but I think at the end of the day, it's good for the consumer.
Okay. Tatha, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think as a whole that it'll be good for the consumer. I think there is going to be some major bumps in the road because, I applaud Movement Mortgage for getting ahead of the curve, but I don't think that's generally the case with the industry. From what I hear, a lot of the mortgage lenders and people in mortgage brokers even, they're really behind the curve, and they're not prepared for this. So I'm concerned with the ones that are behind the curve and how that's going to affect the consumer.
Yeah, at the end of the day,
I can't tell my clients that they have to go to a particular lender. So I'm going to be, doing the best that I can do and being involved in the process from the beginning and setting the expectations. But at the end of the day, I don't have any control over, the mortgage company that's still doing practices of, thinking that we're still dealing with BCD paper and, all these people that were in the industry back then that just don't have their act together.
I want to ask.
yeah,
Chris, let me ask a quick question to Victoria. Victoria oversees a lot of offices, a lot of broker owners, and a lot of agents, of course. So, we're sitting here in the studio, and it's a little tiny county, a tiny part of the world. But how are your broker owners, your franchisors or E's? Are they oars?
Franchisors.
Franchisors, right?
Right.
Right. Franchisees?
No,
franchisees.
they are franchisees.
Right.
We are the
Okay.
franchisor.
Right, exactly. Mortgagee was always confusing. So what are you telling them? I mean, like, we're here and we're talking about lawyers, and that's not relevant in most of the country. How is the consumer going to know that they have augmented rights, that they now have the right to know before they did not prior have any way of knowing anything for days?
Well, first of all, these changes are lender changes, so it really has nothing to do with the realtor itself themselves. However, having said that, the realtor really has to keep the communication going, and they should understand the forms, and we highly recommend that they understand them, know what the changes are, so that they can answer the questions before the fear takes over for a consumer.
Or maybe equip the clients with the right questions to ask
That too.
the lenders.
That too. I think our biggest challenge for the realtor is having back-to-back closings. And when you have a back-to-back closing, if you're using a different lender on one side and another lender on the other side, that's where things can get a little tricky, because you still have to have that 3-day estimate that's out there.
Well, gentlemen, how are you going to handle that, Jones to Smith, Smith to Williams, and that domino thing that happens? How do you think that's going to play out?
well, I mean, it depends on where we fall in the process, right? Like, so if our borrowers are going to be squared away, and they're going to have the money cleared to close the day they're supposed to have it, the funds will be transferred on time. So our clients are going to be well set up. I think when you're talking about these daisy chain closings, and I've done them, I actually did 3 in one day, believe it or not. It was
Wow.
back to back to back, and it was a nightmare. And we had, like, at 4:40, we're getting the Fed funds windows closing, and we're getting and we're getting the funds wired, and it was a challenge. But again, a couple, actually, to be fair, one of those was a cash buyer, the one in the middle, so it worked out well. So that kind of alleviated the stress on both ends of the dial. But again, it goes with who you're working with, the title companies you're working with, the attorneys you're working with, how cooperative they are. The mortgage companies, obviously, is huge. And if you can't rely on the funds being in the settlement agent's possession when it's time to close, you have a problem. And frankly, like I said before, every change brings opportunity, and this is an opportunity where people are going to distinguish themselves, and some people are going to be kind of shown as lacking. And the shame of it is that it's, in those cases, it's going to hurt the consumer. You're going to have people who are going to be disappointed. You're going to have, the clients of maybe TAFAs or other attorneys that are going to struggle or miss their date or have to spend the night in a hotel when they want to get into their new home. I mean, that's a lot of stress. And this, as we said before, is a stressful event. And you want to de-stress it as much as possible. And there are things you can control, things you can't. We try to control all those that we can and make it as really as pleasant as possible a situation for the borrower.
And that's why it's so important to have really strong relationships with the team. And when I say the
Yep.
team, it's everyone that's involved before you get to the closing table.
Well, it's about communication, because
It's always about
you
communication.
stated that it's a lender issue, but I think it's a nice opportunity for the lenders to tell the realtors, hey, listen, folks, stay on top of your borrowers, and if it's not me, it's someone else. Look, the borrowers don't know about this. Well, they need to be consistently and continually told that they have some increased standing, so to speak. They have a bigger say. Hey, where's my information? So it might mean that any lender needs to tell the realtors, keep your clients more informed than before.
Absolutely. every realtor should understand this. They should know the forms, they should know the changes, and they should have absolute communication at all times.
This is a consumer issue, of course, and what good is a bunch of rights if you don't know you have them?
Right.
And there is, Scott, just to jump in, there's a lot of misinformation and kind of fear that's gone out among real estate offices. I go around and I give a seminar on the TRID changes to real estate offices, and the agents all come in and we have coffee and bagels and
Donuts too.
And-
Don't get donuts.
you know what? Honestly, we haven't had donuts yet. Bagels
Okay,
are more
got
kind
it.
of the the food of choice. But I
Not
like
for
I
you,
like
Scott.
donuts.
No donuts, no bagels.
I
for
like
Scott.
donuts, so I would
Yeah,
prefer
who
that.
doesn't?
But there's a lot of fear and a lot of misinformation where I've sat in seminars and the realtors raising their hand right away and they say, "We're told 75-day closings now is the only thing we can do." And I say, okay, first of all, who told you that? Well, some broker at some meeting somewhere told me that. Oh, okay. What was the foundation for that?
Well, I can tell you where the foundation comes from.
Sure.
Because the fear is that if there's any change in the transaction, that everything has to start all over again.
Correct. And that's the misinformation, right? That's where people don't know. This reminds me of Y2K.
1999 Y2K.
1999 Y2K, where the whole world thought everything was going to stop. Well, this is kind of related to the real estate world. So in our world, this is kind of like our mini Y2K. Personally, I think it's going to be a much ado about nothing if people are prepared and communicate, as we've talked, and get on board with the right team.
And we still have Tatha on the line. Tatha, you still with us, right?
I am, yes.
Okay. Do you have anything else to contribute?
Wow.
No, what I was basically just saying there is to add to that is the fear comes from lack of information and lack of comprehension of what really this means and how people are going to be able to work.
Hey, Tatha, hold that thought because we are going to break. If there's anyone else who would like to jump into the conversation, we are talking about TRID, we're talking about RESPA, we're talking about the new changes in the mortgage industry. You can reach us at 914-693-5700. Tatha, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Rock and roll, baby.
I mean, no preparation, just from the
Have
head.
you ever been disappointed because something?
I think a big thing. I mean, I'm not saying it to the show. I really believe that
Doesn't that make you really
these realtors
frustrated?
really can embrace. In fact, the ones that do it are going to stand out to be like TRID. Let me tell you this. Whoever you use, but they got to ask your lawyer this. They got to put in the contract this. Put in the contract that.
To be honest with you, when you're talking about somebody who's moving, right, and has to get the truck, I think this scenario,
Schools,
but
Labor
I think this
Day.
scenario puts them in a much better situation, right?
You can really schedule the date.
Right, because unless you have that paperwork done 3 days ahead of time, you know you're not going to get
Right,
that
you
truck.
have no
Right.
expectation.
You know you're not going to get that truck.
Right,
There's a lot of-
everyone gets a truck like on a
Right.
wing and a prayer.
Right,
Or they're
exactly.
going out of the country on business for 2 weeks, and they got to close that day.
But they get power
So
right away.
Those are the two biggest things.
So, because sometimes now you're like, well, I think we're going to close on the 30th. We'll have the HUD prepared on 30th in the morning on the 29th at night, and everybody's saying, all right, well, it looks good. We're probably going to close, right? Well, now, it's going to be 3
The
days
only
ahead.
thing that was a little bit similar to this in Connecticut, title